All right, welcome back, everybody. Today I'm here with a dear friend, Seraphina Capranos. She is a clinical herbalist, homeopath, priestess, and all around just beautiful, divine woman who I have had the pleasure of getting to know over the last year and a bit. And I have to say, I'm really excited to have you on the show today to share some of your wisdom with my audience. And we're going to be talking about the 8 stages of the feminine journey and all of the things that go along with that heroine's journey, because so many times we've been introduced to the masculine archetypes and the hero's journey, but it's just such a rare treat to really dive into what that feminine path looks like. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure, Shay. Thank you so much for having me. Such an honor to be here.
Mhm. So I'd love to start with a quick little summary. I know you, from hearing your stories, I have to say you have some of the most fascinating, incredible life stories that I have heard. And so I know that we could just probably do many podcasts just on those, which maybe sometime we will. But for the sake of today, I would love for you to share just a little bit about what brought you to this path and how you would describe your work now.
Yeah. So, like many of us, my early years were fraught with some challenges. And I'd say, to keep it brief, when I was a teenager, my father was very sick and he was dying. And then at the same time, I had a spinal injury. So, my teen years were not peppered with all the, partying and drugs and alcohol and fun times and exploration that other youth may have had. I was a teenager cast into this journey of pain, death. And it just so happened that when I was 14, I met my first shamanic practitioner who kind of took me under her wing. And she taught me a lot around how to manage my own energy. And what was happening as a teen as well is I was having, you could say, these intuitive flashes where I could put my hands on a friend's back and feel what was happening in their body. I was having premonitions of things that might happen, and they actually did happen. So I needed a lot of help in that time. That was a challenging time, how to manage what was coming through me. And I'm grateful that my mother is a healer herself, and she supported me on that journey and supported me in that, essentially finding mentors at a very young age. And then my
Mhm.
father did die. And at that time, prior to his death, I had a dream that I would go to New Mexico. And I would say that that began the depth of my training and my initiations and finding a path that's called Toltec. Um, and then consequently, through my own health crises, I went to homeopathy school, I went to herbal school, and I had many great teachers. So the beauty of all of that, although in some ways I felt like I lost my youth, at the same time, it set me up to be a practitioner from a very young age in my 20s, where I was already working with people, a lot of people, mostly
Mhm.
women. It's always been mostly women.
Mhm.
And that leads me to today. So it's been over 20 years that I've been a practitioner. And in these years, it's been my practice and it's been my clients, the women who have been my greatest teachers. Right. And I'm grateful that I've had that opportunity to have so many years in the field.
Mhm. Yeah, learning and watching. And it seems that you have such deep insights about human beings and patterns and how the arc of life can flow. And I'm excited to dive into that today because I'm curious where I'll see myself in this journey too that you describe. And I think for all of us listening too, that can be sort of our practice for this session is to notice where we find ourselves in the arc of this journey. And I love that you weave together so many different aspects of medicine through this practice, which is the plant medicines, the herbs that correlate the goddesses. And you have a program coming out, and it's called The Wild Edge. And I remember looking at the sales page for the first time and being like, oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful journey. This is such a succinct program. This is exactly something that I would say yes to because of the way that you just weave it all together. So let's dive in. Let's start wherever you want to start, and then take people through this 8 stage journey.
Yeah. So, I remember even back in my early days, people would come to me mainly for complex illnesses, major diagnoses, or some kind of crisis. And I began to see this pattern. And then later, it was later that I discovered the book, The Heroine's Journey by Maureen Murdoch, who I want to honor. I'm not a
Mhm.
psychotherapist, but I certainly appreciate um, her contributions. But I
Mhm.
began to notice that there was this moment where a woman would find herself needing to depart from what she knew.
Mhm.
And in that process, there was a deep remembering. And many women would even say those words like, I feel like I'm remembering that there's something else other than what my family of origin taught me, something else other than what my doctor might be telling me, something else that what my peers or society might be telling me. So in my view, I saw that as a deep remembering. Stage one, she remembers. I belong
Yeah.
to something greater. I belong to the greater web of life. So in that first stage, what I would do is support a woman. I consider myself a guide. I think that's kind of my archetype is a guide for people. And I would encourage a woman to remember the rhythms of the wisdom that is encoded in her own DNA,
Mhm.
right? And whether I'm supporting her through chemotherapy or whether I'm supporting her as a guide through a divorce, a depression, becoming a mother in that rite of passage, nurturing that woman to remember that she encoded in her DNA is this deep wisdom. And then remembering that we are in this arc of the seasons. We're in these natural tides of the full and new moon. And we can lean into those supports and we can lean into the wisdom that is here for us um, to cultivate a relationship with that inner voice, right?
Mhm.
And that inner knowing. Because it never ceases to amaze me, even now, Shay, how many women say, I have an inner knowing, but I don't know if I can trust it.
Yeah.
And when we betray ourselves in not listening to that voice, that is when I see hard initiations having to come and wake us up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's stage one, as I call remembering, and a woman does that for herself, right?
Yeah.
And life is her teacher.
Mhm.
I may have
Would
taken
you
on the
say
role of the guy, but life is her teacher.
would you say that there is often a crisis point? Like it comes through crisis, or can it just happen spontaneously?
I think sometimes it can happen spontaneously, and that crisis is within, not necessarily
Mhm.
without.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot. I have a young woman in my practice right now who's going through that. Everything looks fine on the outside, but
Mm.
there's something pushing her on the
Yeah.
inside. And she isn't sure that she can pay attention to it because she's saying, my relationship is great. My career is great. My health is good. I feel guilty that I want something more, but her soul is asking for her to step out into the world. It's like the fool card in the tarot,
Mhm.
right? Stepping on that ledge.
Mhm. Yeah, and I really resonate with the piece around trusting ourselves too, because that's the same thing that I see in my own work all of the time is this fear of trusting oneself and the idea that they can't trust their intuition because they've chosen wrong so many times. And often, what I like to remind people too is that you always had the intuition, you always sort of knew. It's just that you've deeply learned how to suppress that knowing. You've deeply learned how to dismiss it in the moment to the point where you forget that you've even had that spark or that hit. But if we really look back and recount those moments, there's usually those sparks, there's usually those hits, and they're just so fleeting and we just quickly brush them away. And so it can be helpful too to remember that that doesn't really go away. It's just we really learn how to tone it down in this culture and the society that we're in that, yeah, it does tell us, your life is supposed to look a certain way on paper. And once it does, you're done. There you go. Now you're
Yeah.
finished.
And it doesn't quite work out that way, does it? No. And so
Mhm.
what happens is, the second stage, I would say, is I call it cast out to the sea, right? So
Mm.
exactly as you described, it's kind of like death of a thousand cuts by a thousand cuts when we don't listen to that little tiny voice. And what can happen when we don't listen to that tiny voice is we end up betraying ourselves. And that betrayal, the consequence of that betrayal begins to show up, right?
Mhm.
So stage one, we remember there's something, oh, there is a voice. Stage two, but should I listen to it? What would happen? But it might shake up my world too great. Or if it's external, it's kind of like a reckoning begins, right? And I think about the goddess Cassandra, and that's who I talk about in the program. And she's one of my favorites. She's a lesser known goddess that many people aren't familiar with, but she's a prophetess.
Mm.
And she is given the gift by Apollo of the second sight to know and to see.
Mm.
And when she decides she chooses not to go to bed with him, he then gives her a curse, which is she will have the skill of the prophetess, but no one will believe her.
Ah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And she sees the fall of Troy. She sees the possible death of her brother. She sees her home burning. And she has this ability, but no one believes her.
Mhm.
And when I tell that story, I know many women get chills because they feel like they've been there. But we've also, many of us, been there with our own selves, right?
Mhm.
Where we betray ourselves and we silence that voice. Again, whether it be a relationship that no longer serves you, whether it be a social circle, a job, advice your medical doctor is giving you or some other provider, right? We silence that voice.
Mhm.
And once again, what I've observed in my practice is the consequence of that is great. The more we ignore, it's like anything in nature, when we ignore the signs of nature or the rhythms of nature, the seasons, there's a consequence. And we can see that everywhere in the modern world. And so that is kind of the second stage of the initiation, right? Is not believing yourself or having to stand in your own sovereignty despite no one else believing you.
Yeah.
And that's a test of
Which is
fire.
That's very inconvenient too, isn't it? Yeah. I remember, I don't know if I think I might have told you this story before when early in my relationship with Ben, he was kind of not believing some of my psychic hits. And, there were many moments where I would say, this thing is going to happen, or like, you probably shouldn't do this with this person because this is how it's going to go. And he would not really listen. And there was one instance where he was going to hire some woman. This was years and years ago. We weren't even engaged yet. And he was going to hire a woman to work in his company. And he just said her name. And immediately I just said to him, you should not hire her. She's going to take you for all you're worth. And he thought I was jealous. He's like, oh, you just don't want me to hire a woman. I was like, I really don't care if you hire a woman. You shouldn't hire this woman. And he didn't listen, and he did hire her. And I think it was about 6 months in, she started acting strange. And then they found out that she had been working another job the entire time. She hadn't actually been really doing much of her job for them. And she took their business credit cards and went to Vegas and maxed their cards out. And after that, he asked me to consult him a little bit
That's
more.
right. Yeah.
And but that's just one example of many times where these things happen. And I think as women in our culture and in our society, even in our relationships with people who deeply love us and respect us, it's not commonplace to trust that deep innate psychic wisdom of women anymore, so much that we literally believe that we're just crazy or we're just making it up. And we've lost that connection to ourselves, to other sisters, to guides such as yourself who can say, hey, I actually see this in you and I'm going to help you nurture it. That's the thing that I think is really missing right now, which is another reason I'm just so grateful that you're putting this program out there, because this is the kind of support that women need to do this work with integrity and to actually open themselves to their innate gifts with deep trust.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shay. It's so true. And, I am a priestess. I identify as a witch, and I'm very practical.
Mhm.
And I've worked in a clinical setting for 20 some years. So what I also love and what I bring to women is trusting their wisdom and their knowing with plants. So one of the ways I teach plant medicine, instead of me telling you what a plant is for, I want you to taste it and run it through your body. I want
Mm.
you to experience it in the ecosystem of your own terrain. And then I want you to tell me what you feel and see. And to my amazement, I'm not kidding, Shay, like 20 years in, I'm still blown away. I just had a circle last weekend, at how women who don't know anything about plants are picking up all the nuance of a plant and its medicine and its function.
Mm.
And that excites me. And that feels like deeply part of my mission, is to have women wake up to their own wisdom within, and that includes around their body wisdom and their health, and to get in the seat of their sovereignty around their health, right? And around the symptoms you feel, what you think is happening in your body. And then coupling that with some education, right? That me and my co-founder, co-creator of this program, Dr. Carly Danoon, have, like bringing our professional knowledge to you
Yeah.
so that you can know what kind of labs to ask your doctor if you need to go that route, so that you know what those symptoms that you're experiencing every month, or if you're going through perimenopause, like what's happening in your body, and to have that knowledge. Because there's something about a woman's connection to the earth that is so profound and so inherent. And then there's something about the connection of, um, when our body is operating well, when you have the right nutrition, when you have herbal support, when you know how to take care of this vessel, your intuition becomes louder
Mm.
and your deep inner knowing becomes louder. And then you then are able to turn around and help other women in your community, whether that be your daughter or your
Mhm.
children, your family member, or even your community, your woman's circle. Bring it to your profession, right? Having these
Mm.
skills and then seeing your life in the arc being held by the goddess. You don't have to believe in the goddess to know that she's here. You don't need to know, believe in, don't have to apply or be part of my lineage or tradition or any other. It's about recognizing the signs and the patterns of the stages that a woman goes through in her life.
Mhm. Beautiful. I feel like we could just talk for hours about every stage. So I'm going to do my best to stay on the rails here, but I can just imagine how much fun it would be for us to go deep into each stage sometime. Um, where are we at? Stage three?
Yeah, stage
Yeah.
3. So that is usually when a woman begins to head out on a quest, like the search, looking for something different. And
Yeah.
what she might do, what I see at this stage, around this stage, is women are looking for a yoga practice, or they're looking for a tradition, or they're looking for a lineage, and they're looking to do it perfect. You know that one?
Mhm. Oh,
Being
I have
perfect,
no idea. No, not me. I don't struggle
right?
with perfectionism at all.
Right. Yeah. And that's a normal stage that we have to go through, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I have to do it perfect. I have to wear all white and be
Mhm.
vegan and have a perfect yoga practice and
Yeah.
right. So, and that there's no shame in that. I think that's a necessary stage, is to have a certain kind of idealism, to strive,
Mhm.
to do it right,
Mhm.
do it perfect. However, and I remember years ago when yoga was kind of taking over where I live and everyone was a yoga teacher, I noticed that no matter how so-called perfect their yoga practice was, I'm just using that as an archetype because I live in an
Mhm.
area where there were so many. Again, there's that little voice. I would hear women come in and share, I don't think it's an answer that anyone else can give me. I don't know if I need a guru. I don't
Yeah.
know if there's some kind of playbook I have to follow. And so once again, that quest that the woman is following, and I think about the goddess Artemis, the huntress, the moon goddess, she's moving out to find her own song, right? To
Mm.
follow the
Mhm.
song lines of her own soul.
Yeah. Mm.
And this is an exciting stage. And I see this with a lot of women in their 20s, kind of pre-Saturn return or maybe around Saturn return time. It's
Mhm.
like, wait a minute. I don't, and I have I have a memory. You shared your life around that age with me and how you went through something like that, didn't you? Like,
Mhm. Oh yeah,
I don't
I
know if I
think.
need to follow any other playbook.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see it too all around me. Like every time I see a woman in this stage, I'm like, are you 27, 28? What's happening for you? And it is such a beautiful time, but it is so disruptive to the comfort zone. Because it's like everything that you think or everything that you think is here to stay is actually being shaken up and being moved. um, but I love the piece around finding your own song because I have found that to be true many times over.
Yeah.
And nobody can be with us in that. Like people can witness us and people can hold space for us to hear our feelings about the process that we're going through. But I even know in terms of when I was in my pregnancy, which I kind of relate to this stage in that sense because there's this huge process happening. And I remember sitting on my bed looking out at the forest and just kind of being in this state of devastation, almost like I'm dying. And Ben would come in and he'd be like, "Are you okay?" And I'd be like, "No." And he'd be like, "Well, do you want to tell me about it?" And I'd be like, "I can't. Like, there's nothing for me to say except for that I'm dying right now and I have to do this alone." And I can't say anything more right now. There's no words for this. And it was scary and hard and confusing and also very, very necessary. And so I would imagine too, and you can probably speak to this, that we can go through these stages in quite a loud way initially. And then I would imagine that we cycle through these as women throughout our entire lives.
You got it. Yeah, I'm glad you used the image of a spiral. That's exactly what happens. And it can
Mhm.
happen, all of these stages can happen in a year, in a month,
Mhm.
in a new
Mhm.
relationship. And I know this is your area of
Mhm.
expertise, but I
Mhm.
see this in that kind of first, for some women, first month or first couple months. It's like elation, crash, crisis, discovery, like all of it can happen, especially if it's the right soul connection, right? Or where
Mhm.
there's deep karma. What you're describing is interesting. So moving out of that, you know, someone else has the answer, moving into stage 4, the dark wood is what I hear you
Mhm.
describing. And a lot of women
Mhm.
do go through that in pregnancy or postpartum, those early months or even
Yeah.
year. And you are the one who has to do it on your own, right? So
Mhm.
stage 3 is like, maybe it's my guru, maybe it's a new practice or tradition, but stage 4 is, oh no, it's me.
Mhm.
I have to do this alone. Even my beloved or my best friend can't be here to give me the answers. No psychic can give you the answer or therapist. It is about forging out into the deep wood. And that, I think, is the most powerful place. It's actually my
Mhm.
favorite place to be with people.
Mhm.
And I can go there because it's an area I've been many times in my own life, but it's such a powerful place where this is the beginning of the reclamation.
Mhm.
Right? It's like right around that death stage. So the dark wood is we're moving into confusion. We're moving into, oh my gosh, there are no answers. No guru, no psychic, no therapist can give me all the answers. I have to do this alone. And it's
Mhm.
scary because the loss of the identity is coming, right? And that's where we move into stage 5, which is the death. And the death is where you have to let it all go. And the death is where I don't know who I am.
Mhm.
I don't think I'm doing it the way everyone told me I have to do it. This is where illness can come in, like real
Yeah.
illness or birth
Mhm.
trauma, right? I didn't have the
Mhm.
birth that I wanted to have,
Mhm.
or my partner left me. One client I'm thinking of is while she was laboring, her partner literally fell asleep and no one could wake him up during the
Oh,
entire labor and delivery.
wow.
Yeah. And that was her crisis, right? They did make it, but it took years of them processing all of what that meant for them, for both of them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down. And yeah, wow, wow, wow.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
powerful. So this is what happens.
Mhm.
This is what happens when a woman is at that stage: death, divorce, major letdown, betrayal,
Yeah.
discovering your partner has a second life,
Mm,
discovering someone in your life is an addict and has been hiding it, right? The
mm,
death of
yeah.
identity, death of what you knew. It is not
Mm,
fun.
mm,
But what I can tell you is it ends,
mm,
right? We're not
yeah.
there forever. And that moves us into the beginning of the return, right?
Yeah.
Stage 6.
Mm, mm,
And I think about the goddess, or she's more than a goddess. It's a wolf woman is the archetype, the emanation that I see here.
mm,
And after the death is the wolf woman. And I love that story, La Loba, so much because she collects the bones,
mm,
right? So after that death, she collects all that's been neglected or all that's been put to the side. We collect, our soul collects the wreckage and makes something beautiful by singing it back into life.
mm,
And by singing that wild that is in you back to life. All those parts that maybe you abandoned or didn't know was in you, that strength and resiliency that got you through the crisis. That part of you, sings it back to life.
mm, mm,
And it's a very powerful stage. This can be slow, right? This can be years, but it's that part. When I think about women postpartum, it's like the first 5 years of their child's life. A
mm.
woman can be in this stage, right?
Isn't
It
it
doesn't have to
wild
be.
that they say postpartum is 6 weeks? Like,
Oh, I mean,
what?
come on. Who made that up? Like,
It's so crazy.
it's so crazy. No, 6 weeks, you're just catching your breath.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a powerful one. What are
Mhm.
you resonating with as you hear all this?
Oh, so much of it. Um, I feel that I've really been in a mini death since having my daughter. My birth story. I haven't shared it publicly, and I probably won't for a long time, but I didn't have the birth that I had dreamed of. And it's been teaching me a lot, but it's also been a huge portal for me to walk through that I have not finished walking through yet. And there has been this sense of impermanence and this existential experience happening all of the time where I feel like I'm walking with death, even in just having a child and having this impermanence with me because I'm watching her every single day grow and change. And so I'm letting go every single day. And it's painful because I'm like, oh, I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, more than I ever will. And my entire mission is to love you so much that you feel safe to leave, and go and be your own person in the world. And so it's just been flipping me upside down in so many ways. Um, yeah, and I love the journey that you're describing because I feel like the only thing that has kept me together is my own inner voice, going into the forest and receiving songs and sitting with plants too, working with medicines and doing those things that really have nothing to do with my career or the work that I do. It's really about tending to my own spirit. And actually, you've supported me in that too with the homeopathy piece. You kind of introduced me while I was pregnant to homeopathy in a way that just opened up my world. And I've been loving learning about that too. So, curious which plants kind of work with these stages as well and how that might fit.
Yeah. Well, what
Mm,
plants do is they nudge us towards our own our own vitality. They increase our vitality. Literally, they give
Mhm.
us nutrients and are anti-inflammatory and have all these benefits. But plants are also supporting the psyche in
Mhm.
becoming awake. And that sounds mystical, maybe and a little romantic, but they literally do this. So in that dark wood phase that you described while pregnant, and what a lot of women go through, that you say you're still in, that's where I would be wanting to support your endocrine system, right? That
Mhm.
adrenal, thyroid, hypothalamus, pituitary axis. And we go into that in the program because we need that support. Our organs and our glands are not only releasing hormones and keeping our body working, they're also like beacons, um, that are refining our sense of sensitivity
Mhm.
and regulating our nervous system, right? That's also where I would be supporting you, is the nervous system as well, right? The neuroendocrine system. And we talk about that in the death cycle, how we need to be supporting our nervous system. And when we support our nervous system, we're not only managing or helping anxiety and depression, we're also supporting the psychic field. And
Mhm.
I offer rituals in the program to do that, right? Rituals are a way to, they're like they're like poetry in motion. They help us
Yeah.
make sense of the world, and they help us be in relationship with the world. And that's something I haven't spoken yet enough today, which is all of this that I'm speaking about is about being in deep relationship with the world. And
Mhm.
when we can be in that call and response with the world, with the universe, the cycles, the seasons, the plants, our body, which is part of the earth, then we can be receiving messages, right? We can be in communication with the soul of the world. And when we're able to be in that kind of congruency, and I know you've experienced this, Shay, life flows, doesn't it? When we're
Mhm.
in that relationship with the
Mhm.
soul of the world, when we're in that dream stream, when we are harnessing that flow and that power, and we all have that inherently encoded in our being, how to do that, how to be in that kind of relationship. And again, it's very practical rituals, plants, knowing our body, understanding that our symptoms are not haphazard, but it's our
Mhm.
body's intelligence speaking to us.
Mhm. We totally just synced up on another plane as you were saying that, because right before you mentioned the relationship with the soul of the world, I was thinking about how often we approach ritual, and especially working with plants, in this very extractive way. For example, you go and buy the dream tea, and the dream tea is going to make you have better dreams, but it's very transactional. And what you're speaking to and teaching, and what I resonate so deeply in what you share, is that it is a relationship, right? And that's something that I talk about in my work too, is that excuse me, conscious relationship isn't just about your relationship to another person. It's a relationship to yourself, but it's also a relationship to spirit and to nature and to earth. And our relationship to each of those elements informs the other. And I see it all as a circle. And so if one of those relationships is out of alignment or out of balance, everything else is going to be out of balance. And so having that deep, like you say, call and response, I love how you frame that, is the way to deepen in that knowing, in that trust, and in that inner wisdom, because we're not expecting the plant to just give us something, or, be a magical button that's going to all of a sudden turn on our lucid dream skills, or, whatever the new thing is. It's about really getting to know that plant and evoking the medicine within yourself.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I love that. And the ritual piece, for many who probably don't know this, you were the one who guided mine and Ben's parent blessing in ritual. And I've always been so drawn to ritual for my own life, because what I've experienced is that without ritual, things really can linger for far too long. And with a simple, practical ritual, I'm able to let go. I'm able to feel complete. I'm able to say goodbye or feel at peace. And I've experienced many ceremonialists and ritualists throughout the years. And the way that you hold a container and the way that you guide a ritual, it was just the most beautiful thing. It was like so stunning to be held in that space by you with our community. And I really saw your gifts shining through so deeply in that. And I'll be forever grateful because we had only just begun a friendship at the time. And I just had this urge. I didn't even know you did ritual. And I was like, Seraphina, I got to ask her if she'll do this. And you said yes. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
Um, but I can only imagine what it's like to be held inside of your containers, given what I've already experienced from you. So,
Thank you so much, Shay. Thank you. That
yeah.
means a lot to hear. And, ritual helps our soul catch up,
Hmm.
right? It helps us integrate, as you say, complete things. And also, words, we're heavy on the words in our culture, but, there's so many ways to be in relationship and to communicate with the world, with our bodies, and to go through all those different motions. And that's why I love ritual. It helps us make sense, and it provides a container so that our soul can catch up, integrate, let go what it needs to. And it's very powerful. And what I have observed doing ritual for most of my life is people feel at peace. A wedding is a ritual. A funeral is a ritual. Like we have many rituals in our culture, but I think these deeper ones for the soul are so important, and people feel a sense of belonging. That's a huge piece in an offering of ritual. And I actually offer ritual skills in the program. So not only am I performing a ritual for you, but giving you the skills to facilitate for yourself or your community rites of passages, which is so important.
So important. Yeah. Oh, this is going to be great. I'm so excited to experience it as well. Where are we at? Stage 7?
Yeah, so stage
Oh.
7, there's just 2 more to go, and this next one is emergence. So I think about the story of Psyche and Eros. I'm sure you
Mm,
know that one.
mhm.
And Psyche is soul, Eros is life force, right? Not only
Mm,
sex, but it's that life energy. And Psyche and Eros is often taught about the unification of the divine masculine and feminine. It's a
yeah.
story of union and unification. And I see this. So after we come out of that dark wood, we have that crisis and that death experience. We have to integrate. And integration is so important of the soul
Mhm.
and Eros. So the inner and the outer world, the microcosm and the macro. And here is where I see it's important for people, and especially women, to kind of clean up any lingering distortions. So talk about
Mhm.
ritual. It's important,
Yeah.
right? It's important to let go.
Mhm.
It's important to integrate. It's important to separate the wheat from the chaff
Mhm.
and allow that inner marriage to happen. And that inner marriage is such an important, and I think not regarded enough as a maturation process,
Mhm.
right? We need that maturation process. And it doesn't matter how old you are, right? We go, life is a spiral. And so
Mhm.
we'll need to mature many times in our life.
Mhm.
And so here, I think about, gosh, so many herbs. There are so many herbs that I'll be talking about, especially the rose family.
Mm.
Obviously, that'll be our focus when we talk about that
Yeah.
emergence, that sacred marriage, that inner union, and how the rose is so beautiful, but it also has a thorn, which is our teacher of
Yeah.
boundaries.
Yes.
It's sweet, but it also helps us tighten and tone tissue. It does so many
Mm.
things for the female body.
Yeah.
So it's an important stage and an important pause, a sacred pause to
Mhm.
celebrate yourself,
Mhm.
right? And that union, and to allow yourself to tend and love yourself. And, I have a thing around self care, because self care, I don't really like that term too much, because sometimes self care is self soothing, and sometimes self soothing is harmful.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think about what I will be talking about at this stage is more ways in which we can walk with integrity with our own being and be in that sacred union and that maturation as we deepen in our
Mhm.
deepen in our journey. And then finally, we have the 8th stage, which is service. And so, as a priestess, as someone who's devoted to service, and I've worked with women all 20 years of my career, what I observe is when women have done the work that we're describing very briefly today, is their cup is filled.
Yeah.
And then they can serve the world. And I want to be clear here, I'm not talking about necessarily what the viewers have to do for a living. It doesn't matter. It's not what you get paid to do. It's how you serve the world and you bring your special magic to the world, because the world needs what each of us has. We need to offer that contribution and service to the earth and all her inhabitants. And that's really what this is about. It's about that deep service. And I think about the goddess Bridget here. And she's the triple goddess. And she's a mother, and she's a midwife, and she's a creator, and she's a poetess. And she's a great teacher of the sacred arts. And she has a lot to teach us around what we're asking us, what we're devoted to, and asking us what is our sacred vow.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to share more about her too.
Yeah, I'm just really sitting with all that you just shared, and the service piece for sure is so important. And the piece right before it about, what you talk about, that inner maturation process, which, in astrology, maybe we'll relate that back to some Saturnian principles. And I also see it as the divine inner mother and inner father. That's how I often reference it. And it's this individuation, isn't it? Not just from seeing ourselves as the child in our family system, as I often work with in my field, but also individuation from society in a way, not in this like F you, I'm a rebel type way, but in a, no, I'm a sovereign woman and I will make the choices that feel right for me. And I see this so much, in myself as a mother, which obviously had to strengthen even in pregnancy. I mean, I've always been a fiery woman, so that hasn't usually been my challenge, speaking my needs or my truth in settings of authority. But I could see how important that stage will be for anybody who is going out and stepping into mother or stepping into leader, because there are ways in which authorities, figures, medical professionals, doctors, etc., they'll tell you, this is what you have to do. And even watching in our language, I experienced in pregnancy when people would say, oh, I'm not allowed to do this, or I'm not allowed to do that. Or, my midwife or my doctor said I was allowed to do this. And I often remind women, I said, did you know that they all work for you? Like, you're technically their employer. And this isn't about power, but this is also about power. You don't have to exert power over them, but remember that they don't have power over you. You are sovereign in your choices. And ultimately, they're there to consult you, and you're there to make decisions for yourself and what's right for you. And in order to do that in the world at large and to be really at home in ourselves, we have to feel confident and comfortable claiming that inner mother and inner father, and no longer looking for somebody to save us. And I see that so much now in the world, in the political climate that we're in, where there is this desire, for the systems to save us or to rescue us from whatever trials that we're experiencing. And while to an extent, perhaps that can help, ultimately, at the end of the day, we just have ourselves and our communities and how we show up. And being of service is a sign that your life is working, that you have energy to give, because your energy isn't being consumed by your own inner turmoil or your struggles. And of course, we need to make space for that. But it's beautiful when we get to that stage where we can be of support to others. And I've said this to you many times, but I see you as such a mother, even though you don't have physical children at this time. I see such a strong mother archetype in you, such a wise woman who cares so much and is constantly giving and being of service to everyone around her. And, in this little island that we live on, anything I ever hear about you is just how powerful of a teacher you are, of a guide you are. I'm in moms groups with hundreds and hundreds of moms, and they're like, Seraphina, she'll know what to do. Um, and so if anybody is feeling like, excuse me, like they need a new guide, like they need somebody to help them navigate their own inner journey, I could not highly recommend enough. You are somebody that I could easily send, thousands of women to, and know that they would be so deeply held. And so I really look forward to sharing the wild edge with so many women and having them listen to this conversation and feel held in it.
Thank you so much, Shay. And, I want to let everyone know that I'm co-teaching with Dr. Carly Danoon, my co-facilitator, co-founder of the Center for Sacred Arts. And she's an unbelievable physician who is very brilliant. And she's going to be bringing the medical arts into the program and a lot more, the medicine making. She's a herbalist too. And so I think it's the blending.
Yeah.
And that's important to share, is that it's the blending of her scientific. She went to traditional medical school as well in her early years. Like, it's the blending of my magical arts and what I bring as a clinician, and then her work as a physician and a primary physician and a naturopathic doctor. And it's that merging. So this program really is the practical as well. And we'll be giving all of the participants this knowledge, right? So that you can enact it in your own life. And that is it's my service in the world, right? My service is to give people the tools and to remind you that you have this profound inner knowing. And I'm excited to support you in waking that up. And that's really what this is about.
Yeah, and I think I'll interview her at some point too, so that we can have that other aspect of this work that you're sharing and introducing to the world. And I always think it's so funny, some of the most brilliant teachers haven't been really seen online, and you're one of those women, one of those teachers who, I mean, if you ask anybody on our island who is even remotely interested in herbalism or healing or priestess work or homeopathy, they're all going to mention you right away, and I would imagine that that's true in many communities. But I just love that you've sort of been in your own world for so long, and now you're finally making your debut online, and I'm really looking forward to people learning more about and discovering you. I feel like I'm sort of sharing like a secret with everybody, introducing you, and I'm excited to get to know Carly a little bit more too, and share her end of this work. But I really appreciate you taking the time today to share this. And I imagine that a lot of people just really wanted me to stop talking so they could just hear you more, because you just have such a brilliant way of sharing stories. So thanks for being here. And we'll put all of the links to your program in the show notes below, so that people can learn more. They can join if they feel called. Is there anything else about how to work with you, how to find you? Is there anything people need to know before we close this chat?
Thank you so much, Shay. And I want to just acknowledge you and all your wisdom that you bring to the world. It's a gift to know you. People can find me on Instagram, seraphina.capranos. And then the Center for Sacred Arts is a good place to find me as well.
Beautiful. All right, folks, we will have all of the links in the show notes. And I'm really excited to hear what you saw in yourself through this conversation, what stage or what stages, every stage that you shared, I could see one element or one aspect of my present day life, and I think, when we hear about the hero's journey, we're like, oh, it's very linear. And the thing to remember is the feminine journey is just not that way. I feel like some days I'm going through all 8 stages in a in a couple of hours. And so just looking forward to the reflections from this conversation. So thank you so much. Let's do this again.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shay.
Beautiful.